Once a familiar face beside Woody Allen, Tony Roberts brought urbane wit and steady charm to films like Annie Hall and Play It Again, Sam. After decades of stage and screen excellence, his voice now lingers in memory, a cadence of classic New York cool that shaped a cinematic era. Like a scene framed in soft-focus warmth, John Lawler's portrayal of Mr. Bradley in The Facts of Life helped define 80s TV fatherhood. His passing at 83 closes a chapter of steady, dignified roles that offered viewers a sense of trust, guidance, and the comfort of familiar wisdom. Remember George Roper bumbling through sitcom chaos? Brian Murphy made millions laugh with impeccable timing and everyman charm. From George and Mildred to a stage career spanning decades, his work endures as a cornerstone of British comedy, now part of its cherished history. Once lit up screens with commanding grace, now his absence reverberates through decades of storytelling. Known for A Soldier's Story and Die Hard 2, Art Evans brought quiet power to supporting roles. At 82, he passed peacefully, leaving behind a filmography that amplified underrepresented voices with dignity and soul. Like a film reel spliced into eternity, Terry Garr's charm and wit keep looping in our memories. From Young Frankenstein to her Oscar-nominated turn in Tootsie, she redefined comedic timing. After years battling multiple sclerosis, she died at 80, but her sparkle lives on in every perfectly delivered punchline. Remember his booming presence on stage and screen? Robert McCrae's Shakespearean depth met sitcom levity in roles from Cheers to regional theater acclaim. At 79, he passed this January, leaving a legacy that reminds us, character actors don't just support, they sculpt the soul of every scene they enter. Bursting onto screens as East Honda in Street Fighter, Peter Navy Tiasasopo combined fierce physicality with gentle warmth. From action films to heartfelt roles, he carved space for Polynesian actors in Hollywood. Now, his legacy flexes far beyond muscles. It's in the doors he opened. Like a gritty verse in a long-running crime saga, Paul Hugh Moriarty's roles in The Gentle Touch and The Long Good Friday echoed with gravitas. A staple of British drama, he lent menace and depth to every frame. At 86, he exits with his craft etched into the genre's DNA. She dazzled in South Pacific, danced with Gene Kelly, and lit up every frame with color and charm. Mitzi Gaynor wasn't just a star, she was a spectacle. Her 2024 passing at 93 closed a chapter of old Hollywood grace, but her sequined brilliance still shimmers on stage and on screen. Like a spotlight fading slowly on Broadway's grand stage, Merle Louise's presence endures in the echoes of Sweeney Todd and Into the Woods. A Stephen Sondheim favorite, her vocal power and pathos left audiences breathless. Passing at 90, she remains etched in musical theater's most haunting crescendos. Miss Yvonne once taught us how to laugh without restraint. Now we honor her final act with gratitude. A scene stealer on Pee-wee's Playhouse and beyond, Lynn Marie Stewart redefined quirky femininity with heart. At 78, her death marks the close of a chapter in fearless, boundary-pushing comedy. Before we continue these amazing celebrity transformations, here's a quick challenge for you. Can you subscribe to Then vs. Now Legends in the next 5 seconds? Smash that subscribe button and join us on this journey through time with your favorite stars. Remember his piercing stare and Full Metal Jacket? As Rafterman, Kevin Major Howard brought raw realism to war cinema. Later a sought-after headshot photographer, his creative journey spanned both sides of the lens. Passing at 69, he leaves behind a legacy sharpened by intensity and artistic evolution. Remember her alongside Elvis in King Creole and Paradise, Hawaiian Style? Jan Shepard brought poise and quiet strength to Hollywood's golden era. At 96, her passing marks the end of a chapter, but her film legacy still hums with melody, grace, and mid-century cinematic glow. He was Forest Ranger Bob Erickson in Lassie, a steady hand guiding both K-9 and Community. Jack DeMave's roles carried calm authority, reflecting an era of trust in familiar television heroes. At 91, he leaves behind a legacy built on warmth, resolve, and gentle strength. Like a lens sharpening every frame he touched, Gene Hackman elevated cinema with roles in The French Connection, Unforgiven, and Hoosiers. At 95, after decades of retirement and reflection, he departs as a titan, gritty human, and forever stitched into film history's fabric. Like an oak rooted in Shakespearean soil, Dame Joan Plowright's artistry stood tall for generations. From Enchanted April to her Olivier legacy, she balanced elegance and strength with rare ease. At 95, her passing marks the end of an era, but her performances remain woven into theater's very foundation. He once captured the awkward wonder of adolescence in 70s classics like The Bionic Woman and Our Town. Christian Jutner's Boy Next Door warmth made every scene ring true. Though he left acting early, his youthful presence never faded. Passing at 79, he remains forever frozen in television's golden haze. Once the radiant counterpart to Bing on screen and off, Catherine Crosby embodied mid-century poise in films like The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad. A nurse, actress, and philanthropist, her grace transcended performance. At 90, she departs a life as varied as it was luminous, her legacy both lived and seen. With a voice that thundered through galaxies as Darth Vader and stirred souls in The Lion King, James Earl Jones reshaped how power sounds. A stage legend and screen icon, he passed at 93, but his resonance endures, majestic, measured, and permanently woven into storytelling itself. Best known as Nurse Saunders on Days of Our Lives, Betty A. Bridges brought empathy and grace to daytime TV. Beyond the screen, she nurtured young talent, including her son Todd Bridges. At 83, her legacy isn't just roles remembered, it's the lives and futures she helped shape. Like a fire flickering just beneath the surface, Gena Rowlands brought raw emotion to a woman under the influence in The Notebook. A muse and master of her craft, she made vulnerability an art form. At 94, her presence fades, but her influence still pulses through modern film. Once turned stammering pauses into comedic gold, now his silence speaks volumes. Bob Newhart, TV's master of understatement in The Bob Newhart Show, and Newhart redefined sitcom rhythm. A Grammy and Emmy winner, he passed at 94, but his dry wit and impeccable timing still echo through generations. Like a disco ball spinning with joy, Richard Simmons lit up lives with sweatbands and sincerity. From sweating to the oldies to tireless advocacy, he made fitness feel like love. At 76, he passed the day after his birthday, but his legacy pulses on in every empowered transformation. Remember his calm command as Lieutenant Howard Hunter on Hill Street Blues? James Sicking brought gravitas to gritty television, shaping 80s drama with precision and restraint. Passing at 90, he left behind a film and TV resume built on quiet power, an actor who let subtlety lead the scene. From Sumo Rings to Hawaii 5-0, Taylor Wiley brought a rare mix of gentle heart and giant charisma. As Kamakona, he served laughs, wisdom, and shrimp with unforgettable flair. Passing at 56, his legacy is more than a fan favorite. It's a cultural bridge wrapped in aloha spirit. Whether facing terror in Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter, or navigating drama in Felicity, Eric Anderson gave weight to supporting roles. At 67, after a quiet battle with cancer, he leaves a tapestry of characters who added depth, humanity, and grit to every screen they graced. She reigned as Dowager Countess in Downton Abbey and bewitched millions as Professor McGonagall. Dame Maggie Smith's wit cut sharp as steel, her grace timeless. At 89, the curtain falls on a towering legacy, but her every glance and line remains etched in cinematic gold. Like moonlight reflected in noir shadows, Alain Delon defined European cool in films like Le Samurai and Purple Noon. A cinematic icon of brooding allure, he captivated with silence as much as stare. At 88, his passing closes a golden chapter of French cinema etched in pure elegance. Remember her trembling strength in Shining? Shelley Duvall gave vulnerability a voice and made it unforgettable. From Altman's muse to fairy tale theater creator, she was fearless in the surreal and sincere. Passing at 75, she leaves behind a legacy as hauntingly singular as her voice. Once the fierce heart of Beverly Hills, 90210, Shannon Doherty became a Gen X icon of resilience. From charm to her raw battle with cancer, she faced fame and illness with candor. At 53, her story ends too soon, but her spirit lives on in the roles and causes she championed. With sly wit and deadpan brilliance, Martin Mull lit up Fernwood Tonight, Clue, and Roseanne. A satirist, actor, musician, and painter, he blurred lines between comedy and commentary. At 80, he exits the stage, but his layered humor still lingers like a punchline with depth. From The Bodyguard to Night at the Museum, Bill Cobbs brought quiet dignity and wisdom to every role. A late bloomer who made every moment count, he graced more than 200 films and shows. At 90, he departs with a legacy of soulful presence that steadied the stories he entered. Like a thread running through decades of cinematic evolution, Donald Sutherland wove brilliance into MASH*, Clute, and The Hunger Games. At 88, his passing marks the loss of a chameleon, rebel, and icon, yet his performances still speak, sharp and undimmed, across generations. Like a whispered line in a French love story, Anouk Amy's elegance lingered long after the screen faded. In La Dolce Vita and A Man and a Woman, she redefined cinematic grace. At 92, she passed quietly, but her gaze, melancholy and magnetic, remains forever imprinted on global film history. Two Les Garçons et les Filles once drifted from radios like a sigh. Now, Françoise Hardy's voice joins the eternal melody. A symbol of French pop's poetic soul, she blended intellect and vulnerability. After a long illness, she died at 80, her music still echoing in hearts that beat in time. Once danced across stages and screens with firecracker charm, now Janice Page belongs to the ages. From silk stockings to Broadway triumphs, she brought brass, beauty, and boldness. Passing at 101, her century-long life proved that talent and tenacity never go out of style in show business. She didn't just resemble royalty, she embodied it. Jeanette Charles built a career as Queen Elizabeth II, appearing in everything from Austin Powers to The Naked Gun. At 96, her passing closes a uniquely British chapter where satire met reverence, always with a wink. Remember Restless Natives? Vincent Friel gave Scottish cinema its pulse of rebellion and charm. His work captured Glasgow grit with humor and soul. Passing at 64, he remains a cult favorite whose every performance hummed with local pride and a spark that wouldn't be tamed. As Colonel Ty in Battlestar Galactica and a trailblazer behind the camera, Terry Carter balanced gravitas with vision. One of the earliest black producers in network news, his legacy spans genres and generations. At 95, his influence remains interstellar and deeply grounded. Once penned drama behind the scenes and lived it on screen, Meg Bennett shaped daytime television with rare dual mastery. From the young and the restless actress to award-winning writer, she turned soap into art. At 75, her passing marks the loss of a quiet architect of serialized emotion. Like a matriarch whose presence filled every room, Marla Adams gave soap opera drama its emotional core. As Dina on The Young and the Restless, she delivered vulnerability and steel in equal measure. At 85, she leaves a legacy rich with Emmy-nominated depth and decades of heartfelt storytelling. Remember the brooding rebel of House of Usher? Mark Damon went from cult star to producing legend, bringing Das Boot and Monster to screens worldwide. A pioneer behind and before the camera, he passed at 91, leaving an imprint on global cinema that stretched far beyond his frame. A dazzling presence in 1960s Euro spy films, Margaret Lee brought playful elegance to cult classics like Secret Agent Superdragon and Slalom. Her blend of glamour and grit lit up European screens. At 80, her image lingers, sultry, sharp, and forever framed in cinematic nostalgia. The first black man to win a Best Supporting Actor Oscar, Louis Gossett Jr. soared in An Officer and a Gentleman and inspired in Roots. At 87, he leaves a legacy of defiance, grace, and trailblazing excellence that shattered barriers and lifted countless stories to the surface. From SCTV to Freaks and Geeks, Joe Flaherty shaped comedy with layered absurdity and deadpan brilliance. His characters, eccentric, heartfelt, unforgettable, helped define sketch comedy's golden age. At 82, he leaves behind laughter that still echoes with perfect timing. Once whispered intrigue through corridors of Westeros, Ian Gelder brought gravitas to Game of Thrones and a lifetime of British theater. His work on stage and screen radiated quiet intensity. Passing at 74 after a cancer battle, his legacy lies in the truth he found in every carefully chosen word. Like a bedtime story read in perfect rhythm, Gudrun Ure became a cherished fixture through Supergran. Generations knew her as both superhero and grandmother, blending whimsy with wisdom. At 98, her passing closes a magical chapter, yet her legacy still capes across childhoods and rerun wonder. Her star rose too briefly, but burned with promise. Model, actress, and creative force, Emily Summers blended beauty with emotional depth. Seen in campaigns and short films, presence hinted at a long road ahead. At 38, her passing is profound, but her light lingers in the art she left behind. He made arrogance an art form. From 9 to 5 to Tootsie, Dabney Coleman perfected the pompous boss with biting charm. A character actor who stole scenes with a sneer and a wink, he passed at 92, leaving behind a blueprint for satire that generations of performers still follow. In Chilling Adventures of Sabrina and Gen V, Chance Perdomo brought fire, depth, and youthful complexity to the screen. At just 27, his life ended in a motorcycle accident, but his performances pulsed with promise. Now frozen in time, a glimpse of brilliance never dimmed. From Line of Duty to Rob Roy, Brian McCarty gave Scottish grit a face and voice. Intense, nuanced, and quietly magnetic, his roles spoke of fire beneath stillness. Passing at 59, he leaves behind characters that still smolder, etched in drama, truth, and fierce authenticity. You Shall Not Pass may echo louder, but Bernard Hill's King Theoden gave The Lord of the Rings its human heart. From Titanic's Captain Smith to Shakespearean roots, he led with gravitas. Passing at 79, he leaves behind roles that thundered, wept, and stood tall in cinematic legend. Like a silver screen silhouette frozen in time, Barbara Rush graced sci-fi and drama with luminous poise. A Golden Globe winner known for It Came from Outer Space and Peyton Place, she brought sophistication to every frame. Passing at 97, her career spans a legacy of timeless elegance. Remember her quiet strength as Angela Martine in Star Trek? Barbara Baldwin gave voice to women navigating bold frontiers, on TV and in life. From medical center to casting roles, she helped shape stories behind the scenes. At 85, her legacy lives in both performance and creative stewardship. You saw him in The Last Kingdom, Victoria, and The Danish Girl. Adrian Schiller was a master of quiet intensity. With every glance, he added layers to history and drama alike. At 60, his sudden passing leaves behind a body of work that still whispers, seethes, and resonates. A fixture of German television, Fritz Wepper earned decades of loyalty through roles in Derek and Himmelswillen. From wartime cinema to long-running drama, he aged with grace on screen. At 82, he leaves behind not just fame, but familiarity that spanned generations. From Planet of the Apes to Land of the Lost, Ron Harper made his mark in sci-fi's most imaginative corners. With classic looks and steady charisma, he anchored wild worlds with human heart. At 91, he journeys on, leaving behind roles that bridged pulp adventure and poise. Once the face of suspicion in Blood Simple, and the voice of grit across dozens of roles, Emmett Walsh turned character acting into an art form. From Blade Runner to indie gems, his every glance told a story. Passing at 88, he leaves behind a legacy of cinematic tension and texture. General Hospital fans knew her as Terry Brock, a torch singer with secrets and soul. Robin Bernard brought complexity to daytime drama and left a lasting impression through the 1980s. Found in March at 64, her life remains partly veiled, but her performances spoke boldly for themselves. Like a monologue unraveling in perfect chaos, Richard Lewis fused neurosis and brilliance into unforgettable comedy. From stand-up stages to Curb Your Enthusiasm, he turned anxiety into art. Passing at 76 after a battle with Parkinson's, his voice still echoes in every self-aware, brutally honest laugh. Whether in A Bridge Too Far, The Empire Strikes Back, or Cad Fael, Michael Culver brought crisp authority and layered gravitas to screen and stage. At 85, his passing marks the fade of a classically trained presence, always measured, always magnetic, always essential to the frame. As multiple Klingon in Star Trek Discovery, Kenneth Mitchell redefined resilience, continuing to act after an ALS diagnosis. At 49, he leaves behind a legacy not just of transformation and range, but of courage that inspired fans far beyond the stars he helped bring to life. Best known as Coronation Street's booming Fred Elliott, John Savidan filled every scene with gusto and gravitas. From Shakespeare to soap, he mastered the balance of flair and depth. At 86, his voice may have fallen silent, but his larger-than-life spirit still echoes on screen. Once cloaked in mystery as Miss Moneypenny in Never Say Never Again, Pamela Salem brought sophistication to spy thrillers and sci-fi alike. From Doctor Who to British stage classics, her range knew no borders. Passing at 80, her legacy remains written in elegance and genre-defying charm. Remember the wild-eyed enforcer in Slapshot? Paul D'Amato's portrayal of Tim Dr. Hook McCracken made hockey unforgettable on film. With a cult following and unmistakable presence, he became a sports cinema icon. At 74, he exits the rink, but not the memory of every glorious, gritty hit. Like a steady chord beneath Hollywood's shifting melody, Don Murray brought quiet strength to Bus Stop and Knots Landing. An Oscar nominee and activist, he chose roles with purpose. Passing at 94, he leaves behind a career rich in integrity, proof that subtlety can speak louder than spectacle. As Apollo Creed, he embodied power and pride. As Grief Karga, he led a new galaxy. Carl Weathers wasn't just action. He brought intelligence and charisma to every frame. At 76, the former NFL player turned actor leaves behind a legacy of strength, swagger, and enduring screen command. Best known as Ambassador Soville in Star Trek Enterprise, Gary Graham gave sci-fi a thoughtful stillness. From alien diplomacy to gritty crime dramas, his range spanned galaxies and genres. At 73, he departs leaving behind stories that questioned, challenged, and quietly moved. A character actor who popped in Star Trek, Paint Your Wagon, and dozens of TV hits, William O'Connell gave quirky charm to roles that stuck in memory. With a face you'd recognize instantly, he passed at 94. His legacy one of texture, surprise, and scenes that still amuse. Her name may not have topped marquees, but Michelle LaFrance left her mark in voiceover, commercials, and quiet contributions to performance art. Passing at 45, her life was one of creativity, community, and subtle influence, a reminder that the industry's heart often beats behind the spotlight. As Trixie Norton on The Honeymooners, Joyce Randolph helped shape television's very foundation. The last surviving member of that legendary cast, she embodied warmth and comic timing with grace. At 99, she closes a chapter in sitcom history, but her laugh lines remain etched in TV's origin story. Like a melody that lingers long after the final note, Bill Hayes sang his way into hearts before becoming Doug Williams on Days of Our Lives. A soap icon and real-life romantic, he passed at 98, leaving behind decades of music, love, and loyalty to the screen and stage. In The Cleaning Lady, Designated Survivor, and X-Men Days of Future Past, Adon Kanto radiated quiet intensity. His performances hinted at depths still to come. Passing at 42 after a private cancer battle, his story ends too early, but his talent left a lasting imprint in time. As Hutch in Starsky and Hutch, David Soul became a TV icon of cool conviction. Also a chart-topping singer, he bridged music and drama with smooth confidence. At 80, he leaves behind more than nostalgia. He leaves a legacy of soul, style, and pop culture woven into the 70s. From Speed Racer to Saved by the Bell, the new class, Christian Oliver brought charm to screen and spark to international roles. His life ended tragically at 51 in a plane crash, but his career crossed borders, genres, and generations with unfailing energy and magnetism. Then versus Now Legends is feeling a bit lonely. 99% of you haven't subscribed yet. Show us some love and hit that subscribe button so we can keep bringing you the jaw-dropping journeys of your favorite stars. And if you're as fascinated by then and now glow-ups as we are, check out our previous videos. Trust us, they're totally worth your time and ours too.